When ordinary footballers talk about how they spend their free time, we tend to hear the same things over and over again. Golf, video games and social media are all popular answers. Some start taking their coaching badges preparing for a career in management after they retire. Others begin appearing on football programmes, getting a head start on a career in punditry. But Norwegian footballer Pål Enger was no ordinary footballer. For him, football was the hobby, as he turned his attention to a much more daring occupation. An occupation which would provide him with bigger thrills than scoring in front of a sold-out stadium. When police raided his home, they were searching for evidence that could tie him to a jewellery heist in Oslo. But beyond all of the jewels and diamonds was Edvard Munch's 1893 masterpiece, Love and Pain. The painting had been stolen from Oslo's Munch Museum and now hung, pride of place, on Enger's wall. And this was only to be the start of Enger's budding criminal career. As a young footballer growing up in the 80s, there were numerous athletes for Enger to look up to. Maradona, Platini, Rossi and Keegan to name a few. But none of these were his idols. He liked those players of course, some more than others, but it wasn't a footballer he looked up to. When asked about who inspired him, it was The Godfather which he would reference, specifically the Corleone family. In fact, he looked up to them so much that himself and a friend took a trip to New York at just 15 in order to see the location where his inspiration had been filmed. His teammates may have wondered where he got the money for such trips, but it was soon to become clear that money was never a problem for Enger. Despite being raised in one of the poorest neighbourhoods in Oslo, and his footballing career not paying the most lavish of wages, Enger owned the only Porsche in Oslo, and this was definitely a source of personal pride, as he would boast that Norwegians from rich areas would come just to see him washing the car. As a footballer, Enger was highly rated, breaking into the Vålerenga side at 18, a team which had won Norway's top division 3 times in 4 years during his time in the academy. He was well liked by his manager and teammates, but they were aware of his activities off the pitch. There was no other way that such a young player could have the kind of disposable income that he did. While his teammates would take their tracksuits home after a game to wash them, Enger would throw his away and just buy a new one. If you locked your keys in your car, no problem, Enger would have the car unlocked in no time. In fact, his teammates would actually take bets to see how fast he could do it. On top of this, it seemed like he would drive to training in a new, stolen sports car almost every day. But this wasn't a problem within the dressing room. Even though one player was a part-time police officer who tried to keep Enger on the straight and narrow, the code of the dressing room meant that as long as he wasn't stealing anything from the club, that he was one of them. But while his teammates at the club would turn a blind eye to his antics, it was the openness of these crimes that would ultimately lead to suspicion from the police. Following a jewellery store heist, it wasn't long before he rose to the top of the suspect list, and following the raid on his home, he would serve a 4-year prison sentence for the heist and the theft of Love and Pain, after which he would attempt to return to football again, but would never make it to the top level. Enger's 4-year sentence did little to dissuade him from similar activities. Just 2 years after his 1992 release, Enger would target another famous artwork by Munch, and it was here that the former footballer would make a name for himself in the art world. Pål Enger's next target was Munch's world-renowned painting, The Scream. It was Saturday, February 12, 1994. The eyes of the sporting world were firmly centred on the small Norwegian town of Lillehammer as the opening ceremony for the Winter Olympics took place. While the Olympic flame is brought down a ski jump, choreographed dancers and balloons set the scene for what would become known as the Fairy Tale Games. At the exact same time as Norway celebrated the beginning of one of the world's greatest sporting events, Enger and an accomplice placed a ladder against the outside wall of the National Gallery in Oslo. They climbed the ladder, smashed a window to enter the museum, and headed in the direction of the Munch exhibit. Once there, they cut the Scream free from the wall, and headed back out the same window before making their getaway with the world-famous painting. Left in place of the painting was a note with a single sentence: 1,000 thank yous for your poor security. 50 seconds was all it took for Enger and his accomplice to make out with the iconic painting, and it looked to be a clean escape. CCTV footage from 1994 isn't exactly the highest quality, and quite simply the Norwegian police had nothing to go on. With the eyes of the world already focused on Norway, and desperate to retrieve the world's most iconic painting, Norwegian police turned to Scotland Yard for help. Scotland Yard sent over a duo from their Arden Antique Squad, and quickly got to work. The duo arrived in Norway posing as an eccentric art dealer and his minder who claimed to be operating on behalf of the J. Paul Getty Museum in LA, and quickly set about trying to establish contact with middlemen, offering £500,000 for the safe handover of the painting. All the while, theories flew around Norway. Who had stolen the painting? Some claimed it was the work of attention seekers looking to steal the limelight away from the Olympic Games. Others claimed it was the work of an anonymous buyer who wanted it for his own private collection. There were even anti-abortion campaigners who claimed responsibility, stating that they would return the painting should one of their propaganda videos be aired on television. But the detectives from Scotland Yard saw through all of this smoke, and their lead culprit left them quite the clue. In the Dagbladet newspaper was a birth notice, as Pal Enger celebrated the birth of his child Oscar, who arrived with a scream. With the lead suspected target, the detectives began closing in. They found CCTV footage of Enger on a stakeout at the museum 5 days before the heist, which all but confirmed its participation. What they couldn't understand was what had possessed Enger to rob a painting, which while it was worth £50 million, would be next to impossible to sell on any market. After some time, the police realised that it was a plan devised by a gang called the Tveit Gjengen, with whom Enger was affiliated. In the build-up to the robbery, the police had begun to crack down on the gang, who were desperate for a distraction. The theft of the painting worked too, as the gang successfully raided several banks in the weeks following the robbery, as police were focused on the theft. However, while the gang thrived, Enger's luck had run out. After 3 months of undercover work, the detectives managed to establish a meeting with the gang to purchase the painting. Shortly after, the British detectives found themselves in a chalet, where a trapdoor hidden beneath a rug led to a cellar, housing the missing artwork. The thieves had walked themselves into a trap. Enger and 3 others were arrested, although through a legal loophole the 3 others were later freed, and Enger himself was left with a 6.5-year sentence. When he was ultimately freed in 2000, he was 33, and it was too late for a career in football, but nor was he interested in returning to football. Having made his name stealing artwork, Enger decided that it was time he turned his hand to creating his own. He also got his hands on an authentic Munch painting through legal means, when he paid around £1,500 for an unsigned lithograph at an art auction. Enger insists that he has left his life of crime behind him, citing family as the reason, specifically his mother, who was totally against crime. But nonetheless, he will remain infamous as the once footballer who stole the scream while the world watched.